that we try to avoid. And then we also make purchasing very, very easy for our clients on both the Colorado State contract via NASPO, on Sourcewell. We are on E&I, which is focused on educational institutions, and a number of other cooperative buying programs. So really the goal is to make sure that our clients can save the time and hassle of having to do an RFP on their own because it's already been done for them from some of these cooperative buying programs and state contracts. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Colorado. Colorado is on the leading edge. And depending on what month you're talking about, we are number one or number two in terms of penetration of the market with EVs. But when the year ended, or the first 3 quarters of the year through 2025, we were at the number one slot, even beating California, where EVs represented 32.4 of all new vehicle sales, which is starting to rival some of the European markets out there. Over 200,000 plug-in vehicles in the state, 5,000 level 2s, 1,400 fast chargers, and 80% of the Colorado highways are within 30 miles of fast charger. So you really can get just about anywhere you want to go. The state of Colorado and the Colorado Energy Office has had some great programs in place for a very long time. And we're starting to see really those efforts pay off where there's not a whole lot of places you can't get to on an EV throughout the state right now. And we got $56 million in NEVI grants. The final tranche of 12 million was released just this past year. So as a state, we're doing a lot of things right. And now hopefully we can lead by example and have other states follow along as we go. Next slide, please. So globally, EVs hit yet another record. And we're expected to see 25% year over year growth from 24. It ended up being just over 20. But it really is not slowing down at all at this point across the globe. The United States obviously is going to be a different situation with the fact that we have our federal government has gone to war against our industry, but the rest of the world is really doing a terrific job. And so if you take a look at places like China, like even places like Brazil, Nepal, Morocco are all really just taking off, and Europe continues to be strong, et cetera. So next slide, please. All right, I've actually lost the slides here somehow. I don't know how to get the slides back. I'm really sorry. I just see myself. Anyone that is a Zoom expert here? I almost never use Zoom. Okay, so I think I got it. Sorry about that. Okay, so China is really leading the pack worldwide here, and with the exception of a couple of European countries. But the way China's looking at it is they don't have a whole lot of oil themselves. And so this is a way to make sure that they not only tackle the pollution challenges they have, but make sure they're not dependent on foreign oil because they really don't have a whole lot of their own. Europe is taking a little bit different approach in terms of the rationale. However, we're seeing some countries like Norway that are over 95% new cars are EVs. And I think they've been doing this long enough that right now, somewhere in the neighborhood, about 35 to 38% of all the cars on the road in Norway are already plug-in vehicles. So we are certainly the laggards out there, with the exception of a few places like Japan. But the rest of the world's not slowing down for the United States. And I think we're going to find ourselves struggling to keep up over the next couple of years. And there's going to, I think, personally, coming from the auto industry many years ago, I think it's going to shake up the legacy manufacturers. And Geely just announced that they're going to start building cars in the U.S. and should be on the market in about 2 or 3 years. They're already here. Most people don't even know that. Geely owns Polestar. They own Volvo. They own Lotus and also the London Black Cab Company. But they're going to be settling under some of the brands that we don't know yet in this country coming soon. And Donald Trump today even said, yeah, come on, Chinese, build plants in the United States. So again, they're not slowing down their R&D, even though we have started to abandon that from a U.S. automaker perspective. So next slide, please. And here you can see just some of the countries and their growth curves. Singapore and Vietnam and Brazil is really starting to hockey stick there. But again, some of the places you might not expect, like Nepal, are really starting to take off right now. It's pretty amazing. So, and I'm not going to belabor all these numbers since there's a lot of data on the screen here. But next slide, please. What is also driving some of this is price parity. The prices of lithium-ion batteries continue to fall. It's kind of like a Moore's law, if you're familiar with the IT industry. Every year, they get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But what's also important to remember is there is billions and billions of dollars coming into battery research, and there's some great strides that are being made with solid state batteries. In fact, right here in our backyard, up in Louisville, Solid Power has deals with BMW and Ford, I believe, to develop solid state batteries. Mercedes has already put a solid state battery in one of their test vehicles. I was spending time with one of our manufacturers earlier this week, and they actually were doing some testing with that Mercedes. It's gone 1,000 miles, charges in less time than it takes to go grab a snack in the convenience store. Mercedes is actually complaining that the charging equipment couldn't keep up with the vehicle. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that the wiring in the ground just wasn't ever planned for charging speeds as fast as they wanted to go. So when this really hits the market, it's going to do a couple things. It'll take away range anxiety. It'll take away the argument that fueling is too slow. But it's also going to take away some of the objections with fires. And then lastly, it's going to be cheaper. And we are at the point where it's about the same price to buy an EV versus an equivalent gasoline vehicle. However, as most of us know on this call, that it's a lot cheaper to maintain and operate an electric vehicle. And consumers will often make choices based on what they can afford. And as soon as we really cross that threshold, which is imminent, that EVs are a cheaper way to buy, a cheaper way to operate, I think we're going to see a big, big shift with the market. Next slide, please. So are EV sales slowing down? Kind of depends on how you look at it. In the US, obviously, with the elimination of the $7,500 federal tax credit on September 30th, there was a drop. I've heard it dropped between 30 and 50%. But the way I'm kind of looking at it is almost everybody knew that incentive was going away. And still, 50% of the people that were considering an EV went ahead and bought it anyway immediately after losing that $7,500 tax credit. So in my mind, it actually didn't slow down as much as I thought it would. And again, we're seeing increases in worldwide sales, especially in places like Mexico. I mean, the Chinese automakers are having huge gains in Mexico right now and the rest of Latin America. So I think we're going to kind of normalize on this. Yes, we're going to see a dip, but I think it is going to recover here shortly, especially as we're getting to the point of price parity. Next slide, please. This is a really interesting stat. Most people haven't heard this, and I heard it on a podcast just earlier this week. Again, combustion sales peaked in 2017, and they are not going up. They continue to slide. It is the battery electric vehicles, the plug-in hybrids, the hybrids that are taking market share. The non-plug-in hybrids go up, they go down, but they aren't really gaining a whole lot of market share in the last 2 or 3 years. But all battery electric vehicles are definitely gaining the most market share. Plug-in hybrids are still out there, and it's not uncommon to see the dynamic where a plug-in hybrid owner, when it comes time to trade that vehicle in, decides to go fully electric after that once they experience the fun of driving an all-electric vehicle. So I don't see the gas vehicle coming back. We're seeing diesel go away really fast in some markets like the UK, where diesel was huge 15 years ago. It virtually non-existent sales today. So next slide, please. So you're going to hear that from some arguments that it's slowing down, but that's natural as penetration grows. If you get up this S curve and start to climb past that 50% mark, and as we get closer and closer to full market penetration, the dynamic is that it can't do anything but slow down once more and more people get the electric vehicles in their driveway. So careful how you parse some of the language that's coming out of the anti-EV sector, because yes, we will see a slowdown because penetration is getting to the point of normalcy. So next slide, please. And if you've taken any Business 101 courses in school, you probably have seen this chart where for adoption curves, you have the early adopters, and then there's what they call the chasm of death for markets. And the trick is to get beyond that chasm. But Europe is already beyond that chasm. China's already beyond that chasm. Colorado, California beyond that chasm. And it really is, a lot of it is a social dynamic. People see EVs in their neighborhood. They see their neighbors driving them. They think, oh, maybe I should consider it. And so we're really past the early adopter stage and entering in many, many markets the early normalcy stage. So I think we're at the point where, yes, it's unfortunate that we had to lose some of the support, but the momentum is such that I think it's going to be a temporary setback, not a permanent setback. Next slide, please. So yeah, you can see market share here. We saw that the big dip there in October, November, December, but it will be back. Colorado again is usually in the top 5 of any metric you want to go on for EV charging or an electric vehicle sales. We did get beaten out by Washington at one point in the year, but it's we're right there competing with some of the other states that are doing a great job. California obviously has been the leader historically. I just spent 2 days in California. They're everywhere. Seeing some brands we don't even have here, like VinFast, which is kind of fun. DC is kind of an interesting anomaly, but being a small metro, it's they've doing a lot of leadership there. And then we're right in there with the best of the best. Next slide, please. So despite the scaled back influence of the feds and you might say actual attack on the industry by the feds, as I mentioned earlier, the rest of the world's not waiting for us. And we're just going to end up paying the price in terms of competitiveness worldwide by auto manufacturers. But the arguments to drive electric have not changed. The fundamentals are still there. It's still a more reliable vehicle, fewer moving parts, easier to operate, more pleasant to drive, cheaper to operate. So the world is finding out what reality is, and this is just a superior engineering for the vehicle. And we will catch up at some point, let's hope. But in the meantime, we'll just ride out the pause here. Next slide, please. And While the feds did try to cut off a lot of that infrastructure, many states successfully sued the federal government to keep it flowing. And we're still seeing investments by the utilities. The utilities understand that this is really the way that it's going to go. NEVI continues to live on. Some states are upping their game. State of Colorado actually did that when the federal tax credit went away. Colorado stepped in to a certain degree. And so it really hasn't been cut off entirely. And so there's still quite a bit of investment capital out there. And again, the Colorado Energy Office continues with their Charge Ahead Colorado program, which has been successful for a decade now. Next slide, please. So again, we're seeing huge adoption in other parts of the world. China is just on unbelievably fast adoption. We are going to be having trouble keeping up with them. They install more chargers in a week than the United States installs pretty much all year round. So we're going to be playing catch up, but that means that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for everybody out there. Next slide, please. But it does take time. Vehicles are lasting longer and longer and longer. When I was a kid, if you got 7, 8 years out of a new car, you were lucky. Now the average vehicle on the road is approaching 20 years. So fleet turnover does take a while, but we are seeing some of the largest operators in the country trying to dump their gas and diesel vehicles as fast as they can and go electric because for fleets, and I don't want to steal much of Mary's thunder, but it comes down to dollars and cents. And it's a very compelling argument to convert over to electric if at all possible. Just yesterday, I saw maybe a dozen Tesla semis going up and down the highways from various carriers like Pepsi, et cetera. And it's really changing the dynamic. So, it's hard to get rid of a 2-3-year-old vehicle, a gas vehicle that is still running fine. However, we are seeing more and more fleets adopt policies saying when a vehicle has to turn over, it should be electric if at all possible. Some of our clients are buying electric street sweepers, and the airport is buying an electric runway painter. I didn't even know they made electric runway painters, but it's a perfect application for the technology. It's not going very far. It's going up and down a couple miles of runway every day, and it's a great way to make sure that the heat stays on or the air conditioning stays on, and with minimal power draw. And so there's a lot of really interesting heavy duty, medium duty vehicles that are coming to market. And the fleets, I think, are really going to lead it. And in Europe, we're already seeing that. Much of the transition is being led by fleets that are converting their medium and heavy duty vehicles to electric as fast as possible. Next slide, please. I kind of alluded to this. I mean, there are snow plows, there are street sweepers, there are fire trucks. I know Boulder recently got a fire truck. There are electric tugs for airside support at airports. We're starting to see some really interesting things in electric aviation, which I'm very excited about. Garbage trucks, farm equipment, you name it. I mean, I'm also personally fascinated by the whole value proposition of electric farm equipment. The farm could put up a big solar array, and they can fuel their own equipment from their own field as necessary, and really have a lot of huge savings that way. Next slide, please. So that is a conclusion of my portion. Thank you very much. Looking forward to hearing what questions you might have. And I'm happy to turn it over to our friends, Mary at Sawatch Labs.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm just going to spend a few minutes kind of sharing who I am, who we are at Sawatch Labs, and a bit about what I hear from Colorado fleets and see in the market, really focused on fleet. Feel free to go ahead to the next slide. So if you don't know me already, I work for Sawatch Labs. I'm in a business development role. I've been there 7 years now. I think our tool is really valuable, and my job has been a lot of fun. Our team is still small but mighty. We have a variety of expertise, including understanding telemetry, big data sets, advanced mathematics, duty cycle analysis. We've worked with governments and private fleets all across the country, little work outside the US, but primarily here in North America. Fleets with 10 vehicles, fleets with over 30,000 vehicles operating in all states. And we've seen a lot of both ICE and EV data over that time period. We are a neutral advisor, we're not EV advocates. Our goal is to find applications where EVs make sense and make sure they make sense from both an economic standpoint, they're going to provide savings, but perhaps more importantly, operationally, that they fit, that the drivers can continue to do the jobs that are so important to them with minimal disruption. So that's really our goal as a team. Next slide, if you would, please. So you may have heard that Swatch Labs was acquired by WEX. We were acquired by WEX in May 2024. WEX is in the business of making business easier. And you know them in the fleet space for their fuel cards. The company is actually much larger than that, with the fuel cards being just one of three offerings. But where we fit in the WEX ecosystem is in the electrification guidance piece. So we're really there to help their fleets with either their telematics data set, which we've used historically for analysis, or their fuel transaction data set. And that doesn't have to be WEX data. We're data agnostic. So we now take fuel transaction data or telematics data, apply our advanced mathematical analytics layer on top of that, and present results in a software solution to help fleets understand where EVs work and where they don't. WEX as a whole offers also solutions to enable payment for en route charging, home charging, and depot charging. So if you're looking for ways to track, audit, allocate expenses for those types of charging, those are things that we're now able to offer more easily to customers as part of the WEX ecosystem. And next slide, please. As Jim would say, my commercial's over. But I think good to ground you in who I am and who we talk to and where some of this data and insights coming from. So Jim hit on this a little bit, but from a Colorado specific perspective, we have a high number of registrations. I'm sure that doesn't come as much of a surprise to you on the call. We've had some really aggressive incentives available to us, and a lot of people have taken advantage of those incentives. Including me. I'm currently leasing a Nissan Leaf, such a deal. Got my husband used to driving the EV, and I don't think we'll be going back. We're going to be figuring out how to keep that or exchange for another EV. EVs are everywhere here. They're in government fleets. We certainly have worked with a lot of governments in the state as well as the state fleet. We know they're there and we see how they're being used. You've seen them delivering goods. I live in the Denver metro area. Saw my first Walmart Bright Drop the other day. I've been seeing the Rivians for quite a while now. 50% of the time, I'm in an EV on the way to the airport if I'm taking Uber or Lyft. So they're certainly here being used by all kinds of fleets. In schools, Denver Public Schools has a huge number of electric buses with more on the way. And we're seeing them used by residents, of course. So they're really hard to miss these days. These registrations that I'm showing here, it doesn't distinguish between purchases and leases. Some folks, there's not hard numbers out there that I could find, but some people estimate that up to 50% of those registrations may be leases. And I think this is a really great thing for us. And I think this was probably an intended result of some of these incentives, was to just fill the market with used EVs. So here we go. Now we have lower cost access to EVs for economically disadvantaged, and just get those EVs out there. Mine's about to expire here in August. There's many of these leases coming up to expire. I was a little on the late end taking advantage of some of these. So there's some interesting things happening, and I'll touch on that a little bit. But I think something I want to point out here is that traditionally, a lot of the fleets we work with only buy new vehicles. We're certainly seeing fleets talking about at state and local levels, how can we change our procurement practices to allow us to purchase used EVs, and what does that sort of evaluation process look like to make sure we're purchasing, a good EV? So kind of an interesting takeaway there. And next slide, if you would, please. So some really positive things that are happening too in just the technology ecosystem. And I think Jim hit on this a little bit with the battery, but EVs are becoming more and more affordable. Battery prices are continuing to fall, and there's two major reasons for that. We're seeing new battery technology, new battery products that have feature about 30% higher energy density and at a lower cost. The metal prices are coming down, so we're seeing a continued downturn in battery metal prices. That includes lithium and cobalt, and nearly 60% of the cost of the batteries is from metals, so that can have a substantial impact. This is coming from a Goldman Sachs article that I'm referencing here for this information. There's a prediction here that the average battery prices could fall towards $80 a kilowatt hour by 2026, amounting to a drop of almost 50% from 2023. And at that level, we're really at cost parity with your gas-fueled vehicles in the US on an unsubsidized basis. So that's coming right from that Goldman Sachs article that you can reference there for more info. There's also this trend and a lot of discussion around using heat pumps. I mean, if you've been operating EVs in these cold climates that we can experience in Colorado, a lot of the energy use is used for in-cab heating and cooling or heating the battery. So heat pumps are being shown by Recurrent to be 3 to 4 times more efficient. If you haven't checked out Recurrent and you haven't subscribed to the Recurrent newsletter, and you're interested in learning more about battery technology, battery health, how vehicles are performing after years and what their degradation is, I would point you to Recurrent for their newsletter subscription. It's really great info. And then next slide, please. So a little Colorado specific fleet feedback. This is just from a few fleets that we've worked with here in the last year or so. We've got a large public sector fleet that is recognizing that their funding around infrastructure is maybe not as robust as it was, and they're expecting to see less infrastructure. But as a public sector fleet, they do have policy in place to encourage electrification, so they're continuing. So what can they do about that? They're really looking at analyzing how their current infrastructure is being used. Identifying when there's availability for, there's basically the charger's not in use. So there's availability to charge additional vehicles at that location. So how do we maximize the infrastructure that we already have in the ground? And then they're thinking really strategically about, if we are going to place additional infrastructure, let's be really smart about identifying which EVs are going to work best, in what area and where they're dwelling, and let's put charging infrastructure very strategically where we can again maximize continued electrification of the fleet. So it's a reality that we hear all over, but wanted to highlight that's coming directly from a fleet here in Colorado. I had mentioned this earlier, and it's not the only fleet I've heard this from. I hear it from, in fact, many state fleets are really working on an ability to procure used EVs, and what's that vetting process to buy an EV, just as they would a used ICE vehicle. These fleets have had to get creative, right? We saw some supply chain, a pinch in the supply chain during COVID, and more used vehicles were being purchased generally. Just for lack of availability of new vehicles. So I'm optimistic that some things will come through to help fleets, specifically in Colorado, take advantage of that influx of used EV. And then just want to highlight some of just go back, if you would, just one more. Just want to highlight Aspen. I won't talk through all of this, but there you go. So what I want to highlight here about Aspen is maybe two things. So they're obviously, or three, they're obviously seeing savings. But Aspen is, arguably in some of the most difficult terrain and climate as far as temperatures go. And they're electrifying, but the police portion of their fleet is primarily where their electric vehicles are. So even with equipment, even potentially needing to be in pursuit, and even in high elevation and extreme temperatures, they are successful with their fleet electrification. So if you can do it in some of the most harsh environments and harsh jobs, there's a lot of opportunity for electrification. That's the big takeaway, I think, with Aspen. Um, and they pointed out some really, interesting ways that they're using their tools or their vehicles to power tools, which is healthier for the worker. They're not running a diesel generator, and you just have on demand power right from your vehicle. So it's really cool to see how they're using their vehicles. It's really more of a work truck. It's great. And with that, the next slide would be great. And so finally, I just kind of want to round this out. And I didn't hear this from a Colorado fleet. I'm sure if I asked around, I would hear something similar. But there is a fleet that City of Charlotte, and we've worked with them historically. Chris Davis, I think he posted something on LinkedIn that said, we've had to add additional charging at our city lots because our drivers are driving our city-owned EV, and now they're buying their own, and they want to charge at the lot. So we're definitely seeing how getting EVs in a fleet application is encouraging consumer purchasing of EVs as well. And so kind of the crossover here too, I think, is that here's another way that we're seeing electric vehicles in our real life, right? Experiencing them with Uber. Lyft, years ago, I remember going to the Capitol steps, maybe 2020, 2019, for an announcement of adding EVs to their fleet. And then that's going to continue. And I don't actually see as many Uber EVs in Colorado as I do in the Pacific Northwest and some other areas. So that's quite a trend. But it was nice to see Uber launch this incentive right around the time that the federal incentive went away. They said, you know what, we're going to give a different incentive to our preferred drivers to go green, and not plug-in hybrid, but fully EV. Previously, Uber Green was hybrids, but now it's going pure EV to be an Uber Green. About 1 in 10 Uber miles are currently driven in EVs across the country in US, Europe, and Canada. And there's more than 200,000 EVs operating on the Uber network worldwide. So we're going to continue to see them in those applications. I think this is such an interesting application too, right? There's variability in these trips. So certainly another way you can show EVs working in applications that you think might be difficult. And with that, you have my contact information on the next slide. You can get me on the chat. Many of you already know where to find me. Thanks for being here today. Good to see some of you. And thanks, Jim, for bringing me along.
Thanks, Mary. I just want to comment real briefly. One of the things that data point we see coming out is that electric vehicles are deteriorating a lot slower than originally planned. And a 2 or 3 year old gas car is a much older car in terms of how much it's worn out than a 2 or 3 year old electric vehicle. So I'm really fascinated to see how policies are going to change to allow fleets to buy those 2 or 3 year old electric vehicles, because they have a ton of life left in them. Whereas a 2, 3 year old gas vehicle might have, another 4 or 5 years to go before you really need to replace it. So,
yeah, and more on that with Recurrent, that reference that I made earlier to the site Recurrent. They have a great article on just that, Jim. And it certainly varies based on vehicle type. I think there's been I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but I think there's been some bad news sort of for fleets, right? They're seeing the F-150 leave and hearing some slowed production on some things. But to be honest, I don't think any of those automakers were really thinking about fleet necessarily when they built those vehicles. And many of the public fleets, at least that we work with, said they're not really fleet vehicles. It's not fleet trim. They're not really giving us what we want. So I'm optimistic that this is a way to pause and really listen to the market. I'm not sure that, certainly for Tesla did not see the fleet interest coming. I think they still have one national account manager for fleet, one person. So there's a real opportunity for, I think, automakers to respond to actual fleet needs. And it's my hope that they're going to do some of that diligence during this time.
Yep, I agree. All right, Bonnie, we'll turn over to
Okay.
you.
Yeah. So I thought we would have like a little panel discussion, and I have some questions on the next slide. So the first question for you is, what do you think comes next? I think you both touched on this a little bit, but that forward-thinking piece. Um, any thoughts on that? And we have probably 3 minutes for this question.
Mary, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we've kind of always expected it to be a bit of a mixed fleet future. There are some applications where EV just aren't available. It doesn't look like they're coming anytime soon, or they're just applications that maybe are not supported fully by an EV. So we do think it's going to be a mixed fleet future. Um, Fleets that want a reason not to electrify feel like they have that, I think, now. But I think many fleets that have already gone down the path of electrification see the benefits, and they're going to keep down the path, and in fact maybe even doubling down right now to again maximize use of what they currently have in the ground, and add more EV in a real strategic way that saves them money. So we're just going to continue. I don't see this slowing down despite everything that's happening. Yeah, I think that's my general take.
Yeah, I think it's going to continue. We do a lot of government work with a lot of government fleets throughout the West, especially. And their attitude is like, we don't care what's going on at the federal level. We have a mandate. We know this is good for our state financially. We know this is good for our state from an environmental standpoint. And they're just pressing ahead. And from a consumer standpoint, more and more people are seeing their neighbors drive EVs, and it's becoming something that is not weird anymore. It's now a fairly normal option to consider. I think what we're going to see during this next period, there's going to be some shakeout. Some of the manufacturers that haven't really committed fully to EVs are going to find themselves looking around in 3 years trying to figure out where all their sales went. I think we're going to see some shakeout in the EV charging industry, where some of the goofy business models that are out there that are a little stretching of reality are probably going to shake out. So that's one of the reasons we tend to focus on manufacturers that have much stronger balance sheets and are going to be around for a long time. So in some ways, this is a little bit of a pause. It's a chance for the market to recalibrate and focus, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for the long-term health of both the vehicles and the charging infrastructure.
Right on time. Thank you very much for that. Next slide, please. So, this is something I would love to hear in the chat from our attendees as well. How do you think the next year is going to play out? Just the next year. We can talk about 2027 later, but how do you think 2026 is going to play out for charging in Colorado versus charging in the US as a whole?
Well, personally, I think Colorado is going to continue to be a leader. We have some terrific policies that have been developed over the last 15 years. We have a strong energy office with a program that has proven to be successful for almost a decade now, if not more. And just from a social standpoint, yeah, more and more Coloradans are buying electric vehicles and they're telling their friends about it. I mean, one of my former neighbors actually apologized to me saying, "I'm so sorry, I had to buy another gas vehicle, but next time it'll be electric." And so I think we're going to see more and more of that. It might not be quite as fast as it would have been if we had more federal support, but it's not going to be the end of sales by any means. I think we're going to just continue to grow as this becomes something that is completely standard choice on the market.
I think from a fleet perspective, we're going to continue to see more and more at-home charging. We do have both private and public fleets that are charging at home. But I think that there's a lot to figure out in reimbursement, particularly on the government side, but there are some leading fleets figuring that out. And that's not to say there's still not a need for depot charging and public charging. There certainly is. But there are some applications that I think fleets considered off limits, and really usually typically good candidates for electric vehicles were oftentimes take-home vehicles, and there's more and more leaders out there, example to follow. And then as sort of these networks and these payment solutions become more robust around enabling charging with different providers, taking advantage of that en route and depot charging and being able to track and allocate that is becoming easier and easier to report those transactions right alongside their traditional fuel transactions.
See, Wayne in the chat had a question. Why do businesses not put in 120 volt AC outlets level 1 for their employees? They're much cheaper than level 2, provide 40 miles of range in 8 hours, enough for the employee to drive to work and back, evens out the loads for utilities, and limits energy provided for each outlet to about 12 kilowatts in 8 hours. Wayne, everything you said there is true. But the way I've seen it, having dealt with customers day in, day out for the last 14 years, getting out a cord set from your trunk every single day and putting it back in every single day was great for the early adopters. But now that this has become more mainstream, consumers just don't want the hassle of having to leave at 8 o'clock or at 5 o'clock at night, get their cord set out of the snow, put it in their trunk, their hands are all dirty, etc. It's really a convenience factor. And that's one of the things that I think is important to always keep in mind is, what is that charging experience going to be? How do we reduce any friction that we can and making sure that people have an easy time plugging in? So what we've seen is power shared level 2 that can go down to about 16 amps or maybe even lower, tends to provide just a better experience for those drivers, where they don't have to worry about getting the cord set out of the trunk or putting it back in the trunk twice a day. It's and then you kind of get the best of both worlds with power shared level 2, where if somebody doesn't need the power, or somebody does need the power, but the other ports are not occupied, they're going to get more power. And when all the ports are occupied, then everybody gets a lower power level. So
I'll just add to the tricky thing I think about level 1 is tracking those transactions. I haven't done a deep dive lately, but I've heard it's really hard to find a smart level 1 charger. And so if you're particularly a public fleet, you have to reimburse your drivers for those charges. And if they're charging, say, at City Hall, you really they should be paying for their charging. Otherwise, as a government employee, that could be looked at as being a gift, which is a no-no. So being able to have insight into those charging transactions and which vehicles are charging today, in most cases, really means you need a smart charger, and you also need a telematics system that can track charging events, and not all out there can. Because again, you put an at-home charger in, and if you're paying or reimbursing for that charge, you could be charging your personal vehicle alongside a company vehicle. So more challenges in the government side for unconnected chargers.
Yep.
Or non-smart chargers, I should say.
Tom from City of Greeley asked a common question that we hear is, why should businesses provide free fuel to employees who own EVs when they're not providing free gas to those customers? And that is an argument for having that managed charging, so you can at least get reimbursed for the cost of electricity. But we also found that managed charging tends to promote better driver behavior. They don't sit on the charger and squat and keep other people from using it. It's again, it's just a better experience. Now, the flip side of that is, there is an argument to be made that the EV drivers are creating less pollution for the entire community than the gas car drivers. But it will really come down to dollars and cents, and what is that funds flow, and can the state or the municipality get reimbursed for what's actually used?
Okay, I see a lot of questions, so thank you, everyone. I think we're going to take the slides down so that if you'd like to come off camera and participate in the conversation, we invite you to do that. I'm going to take the spotlights down. Any takers?
I'll go ahead and ask.
Okay.
My question, so I work at Optany Inc. and we have a lot of work with like public fleets and EV rollout. So my question is, what are some of the biggest trends or innovations you see shaping EV charging over the next like 3 to 5 years, particularly to like public fleet deployment? Thank you.
Are you want to start on that one?
Sure. I mean, something that comes to mind that we're getting asked about a lot, and it's really feasibility at this point, I think more than actual projects, but for some fleets that maybe have identified that they have a lot of take-home vehicles that would be good to go electric, but they don't really want to deal with at-home charging for a number of reasons, are looking at ways to have sort of depots. So what if I look at all the take-home vehicles within a radius, and rather than having them go home, I have drivers come to the same central lot where the vehicles can be secure and plug in and charge overnight. So our driver now is being asked to change in that they would take their personal car to the lot, pick up their vehicle, right? So we've got some people kind of that want to understand what would it look like if all these take-home charging needs were actually aggregated strategically around business locations so that they're easily accessible, but we have a safe place to plug and charge, and then we don't have to deal with the at-home charging. And I think likewise, they're looking at consolidating sort of where vehicles dwell, even if it's not residential. And then I think I hit on this earlier, but how do I maximize use of existing infrastructure? How can I analyze really how that's being utilized and make sure we're getting the most bang for our buck, whether that's introducing smart charging technologies or just bettering education or adding more EVs that can use that infrastructure. So, Jim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're seeing some trends that have already started. Will continue. One is speed. What a 50 kilowatt DC fast charger used to be okay, and now it's often seen that it's just not adequate enough. People want 150, 200 or more, and with prices coming down, that's becoming more and more feasible. Unfortunately, utilities aren't keeping up with that demand as much as we'd love. So I think we're going to see more speed. Obviously, there is the whole plug format issue as more and more are going to NACS plugs. CHAdeMO is essentially dead, and I feel kind of bad for those early Leaf drivers, but we're not seeing anybody do any CHAdeMO plugs anymore unless a grant program absolutely mandates it. And so for a while, we're going to have Adaptorama with everybody carrying adapters in their cars, and then they'll finally shake out and standardize around NACS, in the next 10, 15 years or so. And then I think we're going to, going along with that faster speed, we're going to see vehicles coming out with those solid state batteries that are going to charge faster. They're going to have longer duty cycles. They're going to have bigger range, longer lifespans. And that's going to, I think what we're starting to see is kind of a split deployments at a lot of fleets where there's going to be a bank of level twos, often power shared level twos, for overnight charging, and then maybe a DC fast charger or two for those unanticipated charging needs, whether somebody forgot to plug the car in, or maybe their trip around the metro area ends up being a lot longer for that day. And we're going to see more software on the public side. One of the things that we're hearing customers ask is, can I change my price on my DC fast charger after the car gets to 80%, to encourage people to get off the plug and let somebody else use it? And that is a feature I expect to see almost everybody adopt here, but it takes a little bit of software programming. So, and then lastly, I think we're going to see more and more cooperation from the different software providers, with the networks from the chargers talking more and more to folks like Mary's team, and a lot more data sharing going back and forth.
Got it. Thank you very much. It was a very comprehensive response. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'll just hopping in real quick on the drive clean side. So we're just about at time, but we're having such a great conversation. We have so many good questions. We're gonna leave the room open for another 5, 10 minutes if you guys want to keep going. Jim, I don't know if you have a hard stop. Mary, same thing, but figured leave it open for the moment.
Well, I am supposed to be talking to one of my manufacturers here in about a minute, but I'm going to tell the rest of my team I'll be about 5 minutes late. So I'll let them go off and have their call, and I'll stick around for a few minutes.
I'll hang for a few.
Yeah.
Thank you. What other questions do we have from the group?
There's a question from David Miller. Why do BEVs depreciate so much faster than ICE vehicles? Resale prices for EVs are so low. Well, as somebody with a teenager that's driving a gas guzzler, that bugs me every day about how can she spend less money on gas. That doesn't actually bother me. But I think a lot of it has to do with how fast the technology is developing. 10 years ago, you buy a Nissan Leaf with a 6.6 kilowatt charger, which was an upgrade from the 3.3 kilowatt onboard charger. Didn't even have a NACS port or a Chatham port standard. And now, that would be considered to be way too slow and inadequate. And just the level of technology from automated driving, et cetera. A lot of people are leasing, so that churns the vehicles a lot more. I lease my vehicles as a business owner, and every single time I switch out, every 2 years, the level of technology has jumped so high from the previous version that I think that is really the main cause of the resale values of older EVs being suppressed. But they're still a great bargain. Best bargain out there for somebody on a limited income is a 2 or 3 year old electric vehicle, and that's why we should be putting more and more public chargers in areas that might not have that single family driveway.
I just point out too, there's been a lot of disruption in the price of vehicles as well. I mean, think of the Tesla example with massive drops, and so that's going to have an impact. Overall, I just think that, and for all the reasons that Jim mentioned, battery technology changes, the CHAdeMO support, things like that. From an analytics standpoint, we try to provide sort of the most robust and what's the word I'm looking for? It's not gonna come to me. I can tell. Integrous result in our analysis. So something like resale value, we don't even factor in. So if a fleet has a sense of what they feel the resale value is, that's like icing on the cake as far as our TCO calculation goes, because it's just highly variable too, and too volatile for us to feel confident in putting that in our analysis yet today. Now, that being said, there's more and more information out there about battery health, and hopefully that will help kind of even things out with what resale values could look like. But today it's too volatile for us to even use in our analysis compared to other more stable data points.
See a couple more questions in chat. Ryan, did any that you want us to pick up right away?
I saw the one popped up from Mike Fraley. What fast charging solutions do you see for rural America where three-phase distribution is not common?
That is a challenge. There was a period where there were a couple of DC fast chargers that were on 208, but usually they were lower powered DC fast chargers, and most of those products have been dropped at this point. So no doubt it is a challenge, but kind of getting into the weeds in terms of utility policy, I think the other challenge that we have is we see much more progressive thinking in the investor-owned utilities like Excel and National Grid back east, et cetera, because they have a very different mission. We see a lot more difficulty with some of the municipal electric utilities, and very much so with the co-ops, because the co-op mission they have one mission only, and that is to keep electricity prices as low as possible. That means that it's very difficult for them to invest in a lot of new things that might not pay off for 5 or 10 years. They have limited resources. So getting new transformers out there to do that three-phase is just a bigger financial challenge for co-ops than it is for the IOUs. And usually their member base is much, much smaller. Maybe a couple thousand people or 10,000 people as opposed to millions of ratepayers. So, and that kind of also addresses Andrus's question. What are some of the challenges? Some cities permitting is difficult, some it's not. Really, the biggest issue is getting the utility to provide enough power as possible. One of the discussions I had with one of the manufacturers I was with the last couple of days is in California, they're building these huge, heavy-duty electric vehicle depots, and they know that they're going to need 2 megawatts, so they ask the utility for 3 megawatts, and let the utility come back and say, "Oh, we can give you 2.5." Okay, great, we'll take it. It's almost a gold rush for trying to get as much power as you can. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of investment. I do agree with Kelly. Storage is going to play a big role in some of that. Already is in some parts of the country. There's not a lot of local incentives for storage across the country right now, which I think will also change because it is a great way to mitigate some of that, especially if the grid can keep feeding some of these depots power overnight when usage is low and store it for the day when usage is higher. And for munis and for co-ops, a lot is just making sure the board understands what the community demand is as well. I would love for Fort Collins to have more than 3 level 3 chargers across the city. And then the other part that's a challenge here is that level 2 third-party ownership has never been financially viable for the 15 years that we've been doing this industry. DC fast charging third-party ownership can work, but it requires a good upfront incentive, a friendly tariff, and good traffic. If you have a high demand charge and an unfriendly electrical tariff, you'll never make money. It's part of that also is working with the utility to make sure that they create these EV charging friendly tariffs. One of my favorites is state of Hawaii, where they got rid of a high demand charge tariff, but they're charging electric vehicle charging stations on their own meter a 15% premium on kilowatts and kilowatt hours. So it works, and all of a sudden, it makes sense to actually put one in as a private entity. But there are a lot. I mean, there are 3,300 utilities out there. That's a lot of advocacy to convince them to take the time to understand that they really need to think about this a little bit differently from a tariff perspective.
Excellent. Well, I think we're about 7 minutes over, so I will definitely know everyone's got to get to some other calls. So I want to thank both you and Mary so very much for hosting this call with us and for everyone for joining. I'm going to quickly put in my contact into the chat, as well as the other events that we have for Drive Clean Colorado. You can go to that events link that's there for all of the different tech talks that we have coming up, coalition conversations. But if you have any questions and want to get in contact with Jim or with Mary or anyone here at the Drive Clean team, you can email me directly, and I'm happy to help out. But listen, this is a fantastic call. Thanks so much, everyone.
I'd just like to say thanks to Bonnie and Ryan and AJ for making this happen. And thanks to everybody watching. There were some really thoughtful questions, and that's always really the fun part for us as presenters to hear what is on everybody else's mind. So, and Mary, always great to see you. Thanks for participating.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone. Well done.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.